When I first looked at the pictures of the Greenbrier and its interiors, I gotta admit, it's kind of a lot. All the colors and patterns and the manicuredness is opposite of what I normally go for as someone who likes a more modern, clean line, organic design. But just like there's benefit to exploring different genres of music and to hearing different ideas, are there design lessons I can learn from my visit? This expansive resort is in a historical building, and the interiors were redone in the post-war era, initially by a designer named Dorothy Draper, whose style is either described as modern Baroque or Hollywood Regency. And later on, things were again updated by another designer who took over Dorothy Draper and Company, and his name was Carlton Varney. He kind of built upon that same style, and I would describe it as being very color-saturated, a lot of deep, vibrant colors. And I'd say it's almost like a lack of neutrals, like even the color white is very clearly painted and lacquered white. And this kind of polished wood is the closest we get to like natural wood tones. And the color black is usually this glossy black. Besides color, there's also a ton of pattern, as you can see. It's in the chairs, it's in the wallpaper, it's in the carpet, it's in the art, it's in the vases, it's in everything. Everything, there's some intricacy, there's some level of pattern involved. Textures-wise, it's also a lot of shiny objects. So there are glass, mirrored surfaces, the chandeliers with the crystals. There are shiny metals and high-gloss paints. This is, of course, the most prominent in larger public spaces, but even in my small little guest room, the use of these colors and patterns and textures and shiny objects are still clearly present. It's all very dramatic, and it gives this feeling of being luxurious and extravagant and a little over the top on purpose, with the scale of these like huge windows and giant chandeliers like literally everywhere. There are a lot of ornate details. Seriously, there is not one single simple light fixture. Even a smaller wall sconce has a lot of detail on it. It's quite the opposite to clean lines, and Dorothy Draper has been quoted as being anti-minimalist. The details throughout you can see on the frames of the mirrors and the furnitures, but also in the trim and in the molding, on the doors, on the little handles, the hardware, the window treatments, fireplace, literally everything. As is the case with modern Baroque, there is still a lot of that symmetry that is played up in this space. You have a lamp on one side, and then you have the identical lamp on the other side. There's also these grand rooms with like two seating areas that are pretty much identical and mirror images of each other. Now, including the exterior space and the garden, I'd say the symmetry and the manicuredness kind of continues outside as well. The landscaping feels very polished, like very neatly trimmed and maintained. And then even for the plants inside, they're like carefully put into specific pots. There's no trailing plant or like overflowing plants that are just organically growing. They're all very carefully thought out bouquets of flowers or flower arrangements or specific little plants that were picked out and confined into a little pot. It's never random or organic. Like clearly a human being decided to put this thing there. So after being here for a few days and talking to some of my friends, I'm actually here on a conference, I can honestly say that while I love how it's fun backdrops for my videos, this style is not for me for my normal day-to-day life. But it was still cool to dissect what I like and what I don't like and why, and figure out what I can learn from this very maximalist approach to design. The first thing is that design is so deeply personal. My aesthetic is not going to be your aesthetic, which is clearly different from everyone who has worked on the Greenbrier and loves it, and I think it's awesome to explore different ideas and learn what you like and don't like, and as you figure out what works for you, you can still totally respect all the work and all the effort and ideas that goes into a design project, even if you're looking at it thinking, yeah, I'd probably do it differently. The second thing is I've really enjoyed observing the different colors and different patterns and different textures and how they've come together. I think that room with the deep red and the dark green and the pops of white and then the darker wood tones with the shiny metal, that totally comes together and it totally works. And that natural light is amazing, and I think that might be the favorite part of this whole resort. In contrast, looking at a different color combination with this kind of dusty blue with this turquoise that's kind of close to it but not, and then there's black and white on the floor, and then there's red and then pink, while still keeping the greens and the florals from the other spaces kind of taken into this spot. It is a lot of different colors, and I think some of them are just really close together in the same category. And because this space is just so big and the black and white tile is just so loud, that high contrast and high repetition makes it kind of tricky, and it kind of takes away from some of the other pieces on the wall and on the furniture. I tried to give it a second chance revisiting the same spot at night, and yeah, it's still kind of the same thing. My third observation is the power of natural light. So this room, compared to my favorite room, it's a very similar color palette, just without the natural light. And as you can see, it's a completely different vibe. Also, I find it kind of unfortunate that the chairs and the carpet are kind of the same shade, and it all just kind of blends in, red on the top and green at the bottom. And overall, I feel like it's losing some of that balance compared to what we saw in the other room. The fourth thing I learned is that scale really matters. As an example, this really loud rug was just in this small tiny little elevator, and it totally works, versus the black and white tile that we talked about in the other room. The conference room that we were sitting in has this kind of busy pattern on the floor as the carpet, but the colors are a little toned down and it is covered by a lot of furniture with the tables and chairs. The wallpaper in the same room is actually also patterned, but because of the scale of the patterns and how it repeats, and also because you're in a really big room and you're likely not up close staring at the wallpaper, from the distance that a normal person would be looking at this wallpaper, it looks kind of muted. And there are louder things to look at, like the carpet and like the different light fixtures on the ceiling or also on the wall. Those other items I feel like balances out the busyness of that wallpaper. In contrast, this green wallpaper, which I actually think is really cute, I love the tropical print. It's in this really large and long hallway with a lot of other things going on. The ceiling's got these bold stripes that are in a turquoise, there's a bright red and patterns on the carpet, and then kind of framing the front and back of the stairs are these black and white tiles again. Taking all of that into account, I feel like I'm mainly just seeing really bold colors of green, red, turquoise, and black and white, which obviously is a lot, and the pattern's kind of getting lost in this and really not adding that much to the space. I know all of this is probably just personal preference, but I think this also explains why it is so common for people to do bold patterns and crazy colors and fun little wallpaper things in a powder room, because the scale is smaller and you're able to make more dramatic choices without committing like a large area to it, and you know it won't get too overwhelming. The final thing that I learned is that this luxurious and glamorous style is so on purpose ornate and done up. And I think one practical downside is that you have so much upkeep, and that any flaw becomes so easily noticeable because that's like in contrast or the antithesis of what this design style represents. It's like every paint chip or every like tarnished surface that's supposed to be shiny kind of pokes a hole at that luxury, and it's really hard to maintain that perfection. Versus like a more organic design style with like a raw edge table that's unfinished, yeah, if your kid stabs a few holes with their fork, it's not gonna look as jarring. Like, was it there? Was it not there? Is it supposed to look like this? We don't know. It naturally patinas and it's all fine. But here, you can't really pull off a lot of that. And this is not at all a knock to anyone who's maintaining this place. It takes so much work, and I have so much respect for how much they've been able to maintain this super old building at the current state. But yeah, if there's fabric that's a little faded, it starts to look more granny than like grand. And if there's like a high gloss lacquer on a piece of furniture that starts to chip a little bit, it just doesn't look right. I'm just more thinking of it from like a homeowner's or even a business owner's perspective. The amount of labor that is required to keep a place up like this, I mean, massive hats off to the people who are involved. If at this point you think I'm all minimalist all the way, that's actually not true. I do find a lot of eclectic inspiration from designers that are a little bit more maximalist in style. And I borrow a lot of ideas on how they juxtapose different elements together and things that sound like they shouldn't go together, but it works. And I love figuring out why and using some of those ideas in my own work as well. If that sounds interesting to you, I have a few recommendations. The first one is Kelly Wearstler. In some of her projects, she actually carries a lot of that more glamorous, modern Baroque, if you want to call it that, or Hollywood Regency style, with a lot of the symmetry, a lot of the shiny objects. And there's a little bit of overlap with what's happening at the Greenbrier, but I do find that she has a lot more neutrals to counter those really vibrant colors and patterns. And she also uses organic stones and textures as like an added palette, as a counterpoint to the highly manufactured, the glossy and the shiny. It's like she has all the colorful crayons you would expect, but also an extra set of neutral crayons, the one that I usually use, and she blends them together in a really balanced and interesting way, and it never feels too much, but it always feels like there's something interesting to look at. I watched all of her videos on Masterclass and I absolutely loved it. My second recommendation is Jacques Grange, and he takes inspiration from different periods, different styles, and he kind of just blends them together in a seemingly effortless approach, a very whimsical, eclectic blend, but it feels surprising, interesting, and authentic. Like this very formal looking room with traditional architecture and very neutral tones, and then suddenly a very abstract modern piece of art, but somehow it goes together. There are a lot of really fun examples and I highly recommend checking him out. My third recommendation is Patrick Mealy. I don't know how to say his last name, I'm so sorry, but he's another great example, and I love how his decorations and design is just very exuberant, very fun, asymmetrical but well balanced, and I also feel like it's a blend of so many different styles, so regardless where your starting point is and your natural tendencies are, I think you can find inspiration from some of his work. And that's all I had for today's video. Let me know what you thought of all the rooms. What did you think? Did you have a favorite? Did you have a least favorite? And I hope this video was helpful and or entertaining, and I'll talk to you again next time. Bye!